Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 26th, 2011. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, does glassware really affect the characteristics of your beer? Chris Colby, editor of Brew Your Own magazine, and I go over the results of the BYO-BBR collaborative experiment on glassware, with a little help from Steve Wilkes. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. Also, you can find our brewer's logbooks to help you log and track 50 batches of beer. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us. Click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone and Android podcast apps on their respective stores, and we're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, too. I'm going to go very quickly in the opening comments because we got a lot of ground to cover. Also, frankly, I'm tired after hiding from the tornado sirens late last night in the storm cellar with me and my family, my wife, my 2 kids, 3 dogs, and mother-in-law. We are okay. The only thing we lost was sleep. But our hearts go out again to those who have lost so much due to the tornadoes in the past few days. It really gives you an appreciation for what's important. And remember, there is a banner on our site for the American Red Cross if you want to go help. Or you can go to redcross.org if you'd like. And I'll be donating this week's revenue from the Amazon link to the Red Cross because there's just so much that needs to be done. So click on both, the Amazon link. It won't cost you any extra, and the money will go to the Red Cross and go to the Red Cross, too, and help them out. Switching gears very quickly without a clutch, we go into the mailbag. Justin from northern Minnesota writes, a while ago you had Derek Johnson on your podcast to talk about Mr. Beer. Well, within the next week or so, Derek is going to make his 10,000th post on our Mr. Beer fans forum. He will be the first person to hit this magic number, and I'm wondering if you could give him a shout-out. His advice has been helpful to us, all of us on the site. Derek goes by the handle D-Rock on the forum. Thanks, Justin. And Justin gave me a follow-up email to say that Derek did it. He has posted more than 10,000 times on the Mr. Beer Fans forum. And I appreciate it, Derek. Thanks for being out there helping brewers improve their brewing because the whole hobby benefits from folks like you. On the topic of beer drinking and heads of state, to follow the thread from the past couple of episodes, President Obama visited Ireland and linked up with distant relatives, and while he was there, he was served a Guinness, just like the Queen was served a Guinness. And did he stare at it on the bar and walk away? No. According to the Associated Press, Obama downed the full pint in 4 slurps and came away with a foam mustache. So there you go. A reminder, this will be the last episode before the June break. We always take June off from posting podcasts. We'll be back in July after we take a bit of vacation, and we will see you in San Diego at the National Homebrewers Conference out there. Now, let's get to the results of our collaborative experiment on the effects of glassware. Well, Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're now doing yet another experiment. I can't even remember which one this is, which collaborative experiment this is. Maybe we just won't keep track of the numbers anymore. We'll just say it's an ongoing thing.
That sounds good because I don't remember what number in the series this is either.
I do want to say before we get on with the glassware experiment that I have done the first round of the yeast rehydration experiment. And there's some interesting results so far, and I'm going to do it again. This first round was a moderate gravity beer of 1049, and I'm going to do it again with a higher gravity beer to see if there's any difference in the results. So I would encourage those of you who want to participate in the experiment. The due date for that one is July 15th, I think we said. Mm-hmm. And then, that gives everybody plenty of time to do that, at least one round. And so I hope that you will take part. But, July 15th is going to be here before we know it, and you've got to brew the beer before then. So I hope that a lot of people will take part in that, because I think it's going to be a fun one to see what happens. So we're talking about, what's our experiment that we're going to talk about this week, though?
This week we're testing the effect of different glassware on basically on your beer drinking experience. Different glasses, obviously we all know there are different kinds of beer glasses. There's the shaker pint that you see at 99% of brew pubs. There's the tall thin Pilsner glass that you'll see sometimes. Wheat beer has its distinctive curvy glass, usually tall. And Belgian beers, of course, come in everything from goblets to big, thick, Hoegaarden mugs to, Duvel glass is very famous. And also recently, Sam Adams put out a new glass that's, supposed to be specifically designed to enhance your beer drinking experience. And anyway, so we thought we'd put this to a test. Try tasting the same beer in two or more glasses, and see if there really was any difference. Could you smell anything different? Could you taste anything different? Does the amount of say foam generated differ, because some of the glasses are etched on the bottom with the idea that they release more CO2 bubbles. And also I threw in at the last minute, I threw in the idea of temperature. Does drinking beer out of different glasses, is the temperature going to change in a different way? Because either the glass is thicker to begin with, some are thicker and some are thin. Does the glass, if you start out at room temperature, does it warm up the beer a lot, or does it later on, because the glass is, thicker glasses, does it insulate it better? Mm-hmm. So basically our question is just, does glassware matter when you drink beer?
Yeah, and you were a bit skeptical going into this.
Yeah, I sort of, I had read all the, the claims made by various glasses, and this is supposed to do this and whatever. And, I understood that etching is going to make, some more bubbles come up. But I sort of thought that, the glass you drink was more of an aesthetic thing, like a visual thing, and, I like drinking Duvel out of a Duvel glass, but I really wouldn't have suspected that the glassware was changing your beer drinking experience.
And we don't want to do any spoilers right now with your experiment results, but we asked everybody to participate, and we got 9 very detailed sets of data, and we appreciate everybody doing that. I know it was hard work, drinking good beer out of different glasses and writing things down, but we appreciate you guys suffering for the cause. We were hoping to make this a bit fun, and I think people did have fun with it. And speaking of people having fun drinking beer, Steve Wilkes and I, the last time we got together, we decided to do our own little tasting and record that. And here's what happened. Oh, did she give you?
Yes.
Yes. You always leave something.
You'll always be invited back.
Oh, and your fur hat. I still have that. Well, Steve, here we are back in the studio.
It's like I've never left.
Yeah, exactly. And this is going to be one of the funner things, I hope, that we're doing, because it takes very little thought.
No, that's good.
Not like what we usually do. Does take a lot of thought.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do, I've got the Avery Maharaja Double IPA. And what do you have?
I've got the Old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout.
And that's North Coast Brewing Company.
That's right.
So you're a little bit little bit malty. I'm a little bit hoppy.
That's right.
You're a little bit country. I'm a little bit rock and roll.
And I will not be on Dancing with the Stars. So, synchronized opening.
Oh, here we go. All right. I've got foil. Now, we have to talk about what we're doing because we got 3 different glasses here, and we're going to pour the same velocity and the same time. You know, we're trying to make this even between the 3 of these.
Yes.
Now, the first one is what is this?
It's a cordial-sized brandy snifter. So it's not a big brandy snifter. It's something that you drink like Benedictine out of.
Okay. Then the second one is a gift from Alex Roberts, our friend Alex Roberts.
Yes.
These are the small triple Carmelite tulip glasses.
Yes.
And then the third?
The third
these
is,
are fancy.
These are Pilsner glasses that my mother-in-law gave me, and they are the special jazz edition.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Because they have hand-painted pictures of piano, bass, and drums on them.
Yeah, they're really cool.
So
jazzy glasses.
I'll tweet a picture of that in a few minutes.
Just try to get the mess on my counter off. Oh, what a mess. Okay.
We can take that out in post.
Okay. Now, ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, go.
Okay.
Into the brandy snifter.
A vigorous pour.
2, 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3 into the tulip glass. And then 1, 2, 3 into the Pilsner glass.
It sounded oddly like monks throat singing.
That's Tuvan throat singing to you.
So the idea...
Oh, my goodness. Now, first of all, let's look. Let's use our eyes to see what happens. It looks like as far as the creation of head and retention, it looks like that goes to the Pilsner glass.
Well, that's no kidding.
You got
got nothing.
80% foam in yours.
Yes.
And I've got about 50-50 in mine. Now, the brandy snifter got nothing. No foam.
In both.
Yeah, in both of ours. The brandy snifter has no foam. It went away almost immediately. The tulip glass on mine has a nice, like half finger of foam on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're documenting this with the pictures.
Yes.
And then yours has a little bit of foam to it or head, and it is. I've also heard it called crown. For those who, I think that for those who are a little bit self-conscious about calling it head. So anyway,
I'm not going there.
So there is a definite difference in appearance of the 3 beers.
There's a fact.
So let's go with the smell.
Okay.
Smelling the brandy snifter first. Ooh, that smells good.
Well, I suggested the brandy snifters because I knew that I was going to bring the Russian Imperial Stout, these are the glasses that I always drink this kind of beer from. And so it's interesting that you're drinking the Maharaja. It really concentrates the nose.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of hop aroma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not tasting it yet. Oh, you already tasted it.
Oh, I tasted
it. You jumped the gun there. Okay.
Oh, I see.
I'm going to the triple Carmelite with the aroma. And in fact, I'm going to hold them side by side here.
Okay.
I'm getting more nose out of the brandy snifter.
I'm getting more nose out of the brandy snifter. Blah, blah, blah. Makeup!
More nose. So the aroma so far goes to the brandy snifter.
Yes.
And I'm going to hold the brandy snifter and the Pilsner glass side by side.
Okay. Okay.
There's there's a lot of foam still on the
right.
top of the Pilsner glass.
And that's
maybe trapping the aroma.
I'm not getting any aroma out of it other than kind of a breadiness. And my beer has a kind of a bready component. So,
yeah, there's hardly any aroma coming out of the Pilsner glass.
Boy, it really is surprising how much difference it makes, though.
Yeah, yeah,
in a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Okay, and have you tasted yet?
I have not. So I'm going to taste the brandy snifter.
Okay.
That tastes like Maharaja.
And that tastes like a little Rasputin.
Mm.
It looks
Okay.
like Sean Paxton.
This is true. If you follow Sean Paxton, the homebrew chef, on Twitter, you will recognize the label of the Old Rasputin.
And now from the tulip
For
glass.
the tasting the tulip glass. I'm going to go back and taste it.
Well,
There's not as much of a difference in the taste between
No.
the brandy snifter and the tulip glass there.
but in the sense that if you are breathing at the
you're-
same time that you're drinking,
Right.
I think the brandy snifter wins out
Yeah.
in terms of the concentration of flavor altogether
Right.
in your
Right.
experience.
Okay. Now the Pilsner glass.
Right.
Wow. That is dramatically less enjoyable.
Yeah, that's very amazing. There's not anywhere near as much going on
No.
with my beer, and apparently with yours either.
Mm-mm.
How interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's still some foam on there.
yeah.
A little bit of foam on there.
I've still got about an inch, 3/4 of an inch
Yeah.
of foam, of head. And yet the flavor is nowhere near. If I drank Old Rasputin from this tall Pilsner glass, it is not as good a beer
Right.
as drinking it from the brandy snifter.
Yeah. Now, we don't have, as a control, we don't have the shaker glasses,
Right.
which,
But there's so few shaker communities these days.
and they're made of wood.
They're made of
wood
wood
and no
and-
fasteners.
Yeah,
So
but it's very stylish. Still,
is it do they have fasteners? Surely they have fasteners, or everything fall apart. Am I thinking about Quakers? I don't know. No, I'm thinking about zippers. I don't know. But I think we've reached some sort of a conclusion here that that the shape of the glass, at least with these two beers, it seems to make a difference.
it definitely does, and it makes me want to pay attention. Well, and I think I do anyway, though. But it makes me really think about. I'm drinking this kind of beer and this kind of wine. I mean, it's the same concept with wine glasses, but that there really is a point to it, and you're not just being a beer snob. You're not just being, hoity-toity because you kind of insist on a particular kind of glass. There's a difference, and particularly when you're, brought out your best homebrew, or in this case, the best, the best examples of craft brew. You don't want it to be shown in less than its best light.
Now, I'm going to take, as a control, I'm going to drink straight out of the bottle.
Okay. I've never seen him do that before.
I need a brown paper bag. No, but it's even worse than the Pilsner glass. So
The Pilsner glass with this Russian Imperial Stout is very flavorless. It's
compared
kind
to
of-
the other two.
Compared to the other two, it loses, and it kind of the nose that comes up from it is kind of almost musty. It's kind of weird. It's so interesting. Now, on the other hand, the next time we do this, we should drink beers that are designed for the glasses specifically.
Good point.
So, and now I do think that
if we had a good Pilsner, like a Pilsner Urquell
Exactly.
or Quell, and the Pilsner glass,
Yep.
perhaps it would be a better experience than putting that in. So maybe next time we'll do that.
Yeah.
That gives us an excuse to do this again. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well,
Thanks, Dave.
thanks, Dave. What the hell's your name? You're going to cut that out. How long have I known you?
So as you can tell, Steve and I had fun, and we did find that, and I have to admit, I was a bit surprised that the glassware made as much of a difference especially in the flavor and aroma, because I could have predicted that the shape of the glass would affect the head retention, or at least the forming of the head. But I was a bit surprised at how dramatic the impact was on aroma and flavor at least with those glasses and with those beers. So what did you now? You have a spreadsheet. You put me to shame, of course, on the scientific aspects of things, being a scientist yourself. But you took the experiment to kind of sort of another level with what you did.
Yeah, I actually should have thought of this other level like before the night I did the experiment. But yeah, I took several glasses, 8 different kinds of glasses, and I planned to do the experiment that as we had written it out. But it also occurred to me that the temperature you drink beer at matters, and that the glass you put it in, there's going to be a couple different ways that temperature can be affected. For one thing, if you most places you go, glassware is at room temperature. Certainly, I think in most people's houses, they just store it up in a cabinet, and your glass is at room temperature. So it makes a certain amount of sense. And although I didn't test this specifically, it certainly the numbers sort of jive with this idea that the heavier that your glass is, the more it's going to warm up your beer, because your beer is going to be lower than room temperature when you pour it in there. And, you're just going to have a bigger volume of glass to transfer heat to your beer. A second way it might influence it is sort of in the opposite way, is that thicker glasses are going to be more insulated, and especially insulated from your hand. I thought, well, maybe, initially a thicker glass might, transfer more heat to your beer, but then later on it would, actually protect your glass from heat getting there.
Yeah, after all, like brandy snifters, I believe are designed to use the heat of your hand to warm up the beverage. They're thin. You hold them, kind of cupped in your hand, and so that there is heat transfer. So they're kind of designed to heat up the beverage a bit, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And also a difference between, some beer glasses are stemmed, so you're holding onto the stem of the glass, not your hands aren't literally a couple millimeters from the beer. And I wondered if that might have a difference, because obviously the temperature of the beer is going to affect your perception of the aroma of the beer. It's going to release, and flavor. It's going to, the warmer the beer is, it's going to be perceived as more aromatic or whatever. Although the quality of that is also going to change, because the warmer beer gets, typically the less enjoyable sort of the flavors and aromas get to most people when it reaches a certain point. So I measured temperature as well as the aroma and flavor initially. I quit taking aroma and flavor measures later as the temperature in the glasses diverged, because that's sort of getting into a whole other question. And another thing, I just took a millimeter ruler, and periodically, like every 10 minutes or so, I would measure the depth of the foam, because some glasses were etched, some weren't, and it was just interesting to see if the glass actually affected the amount of foam standing on top of the beer.
So what were your overall impressions? I mean, first of all, let's talk about foam generation and retention. How did they shake out?
Yeah, well, foam is generated from CO2 bubbles that break out of solution, and they come rising up through the beer. The outside of the bubble actually collects some various proteins and some carbohydrates and stuff floating in the beer, and when it reaches the top, it's a bubble with a little coating on it, and then the action of thousands or tens of thousands, or I don't know the exact number of bubbles that emerge from a glass of beer, but the bubbles from underneath will hit it and move it up, and pretty soon you've got just a layer of bubbles, and that's how foam is created. And then as far as retention, the outside is coated with the things, and with the proteins and carbohydrates that cause foam, and those just slowly drain away from the bubble, and once they once the bubble becomes thin enough, it just bursts and collapses. And obviously, one of the factors there is bubble size. Smaller bubbles lead to more stable foam because they don't break as easy as bigger bubbles. The wall can get thinner. And I actually did. I didn't put it on the spreadsheet, but I did see some differences in bubble sizes. I also held all the glasses up a couple times too. I just put a blank word processing sheet on my iMac and took pictures of them all at like 3 or 4 different times. So I should be able to print those out at some point and actually count bubbles and give it the volume was the same. I can see if the Duval and Sam Adams glasses, the etched ones, are actually releasing more bubbles. I mean, it looked like unequivocally that yes, that was the case. But it's always good to actually count out the numbers at some point.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, which glasses did you evaluate, and which ones were better at the head retention side of things?
Okay, I did. I started out with I had a plastic kegger glass, like every keg party you've probably ever gone to, just to
like those red Solo cups.
Exactly. Yes, plastic glass, 16 ounce. I had a mug of beer, just sort of a classic beer mug. Said Duff Beer, and a picture of Homer Simpson on it. Beer. I had a shaker pint. It's a Red Hook one, not that it matters. I had a Pilsner glass, a tall, thin glass that sort of tapered up, so that the top was slightly wider than the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I had an Iinger wheat glass, the classic sort of, almost female shape wheat glass. I had the Duval glass, which is kind of similar to a brandy snifter, has the globular bottom and the sort of fluting cylindrical top. I had an Orval goblet, which is just a goblet, a big, shallow, wide glass, and I had one of the new Sam Adams glasses.
Which one was the best, and which one was the worst?
Well, I mean,
was there a trend in structure that sort of lent itself to better head retention or worse head retention?
With head retention, the Duval glass sort of put everybody under. The glasses that did the best with the head retention were the Pilsner and the wheat beers. Those had a nice one. And sort of a notch up from that, the Sam Adams, and then like a notch up from that, the Duval. And the Sam Adams and the Duval are both etched on the bottom. And the ones that did the worst, the plastic kegger glass didn't do much, and the mug and the shaker pint didn't do much really either. Also the goblet, the Orval goblet, throughout the experiment didn't do well on head, probably because it was so wide and shallow that there wasn't although it had a huge area of beer at the top, there was under all the beer in there wasn't very much volume.
The older I get, the more wide and shallow I get. So, and the less important my head is. So, so there's one difference. I mean, there's an appearance that's a difference, and certainly that one would believe that at least that the volume and quality of the foam on the top of the beer would impact the aroma. So what were your perceptions on aroma throughout that tasting as well?
On aroma, I basically took the initial impressions because I knew that as the experiment progressed that the temperature was going to start affecting those more and more, and I actually knew from the initial temperature taking that they already, just pouring it in the glasses, they were already at different temperatures. But basically, I found the most aroma coming from the mug of beer, which is kind of weird, the Duvel glass, and the Sam Adams glass.
Huh.
And I think, I sort of think how it worked is that the Duvel glass had, when you poured 12 ounces of beer in it, because I poured the same amount of beer in all the glasses, there was still, it still had a little sort of, quote unquote chamber that was empty, and so it sort of concentrated the flavors right there. Whereas most of the other glasses were, well, some of the other glasses were like the goblet was filled right to the rim. The mug also was very aromatic at first, and I kind of wondered why that would be. I mean, it also had a little space at the top because it was a 16-ounce mug, and there was only 12 ounces of beer in it. But it was also, 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit above most of the rest of the other beers. So it was just pouring in the mug warmed it up, and at least I got more aroma from it, and that's where I believe that difference is coming from.
Let's talk about temperature. I mean, what was the temperature range, and how did the glasses affect the temperature of the beer?
Well, I pulled the beer out of the refrigerator, so it was at refrigerator temperature to start with. Probably about 44 degrees or whatever, 40 to 44. And I poured the beer in all the glasses, and actually took their pictures and measured the depth of the foam, and assessed the aroma before I took the first temperature reading. So it's been sitting there for a couple minutes. But the first readings I took gave temperatures in the 50-degree Fahrenheit range. The lowest was the plastic kegger glass at 52 degrees. The Duvel glass was next, and the highest were the mug and the shaker pint were at 56 and 57, and sort of surprisingly, also the Pilsner and the wheat beer were already at 56, 57. And sort of not. It was interesting that those were warm so fast because those are rather thin-sided glasses, but they were also just tall and thin, and they may have just from the the room temperature, they might have just absorbed that much heat already.
And then how did the temperature change over time?
Yeah, temperature, obviously, drinking colder beer at room temperature, temperatures converged on room temperature by the end. And I've got to look at the numbers more closely, but I think that they basically stayed in step with their initial temperature differences. Like I can see for now that the plastic kegger glass, which was the coldest at the beginning, was also the coldest at the end, which was kind of interesting because the initial temperature made sense to me because you pour the classic kegger glass weighs almost nothing, so there's a little thermal mass to it. But I would have thought during the experiment that the beer would have picked up more temperature. But maybe plastic is just a much better insulator or that type of plastic than the glass that I had.
Yeah, that's surprising.
So the humble keg glass did best for, in this case, although in operation you might, if you're somewhere where you have a keg glass, it might be constantly in your hand and not in this. In my situation, it was one of 8 glasses sitting, on my desk in front of me.
Right.
And other ones, trying to think what came out second best here. The Duvel glass looks like it came out second best. Yeah, and that was the second best starting. And let's check what was the hottest one to begin with. Those two. Yeah, it looks like pretty much the initial temperature difference just was just retained throughout the experiment.
Although the Pilsner glass, it looks like, had maybe the biggest temperature swing, going from 56 degrees Fahrenheit to 75 degrees Fahrenheit
right
over that time period. And that's
And
what,
that-
over like a 2-hour time period? Is that
like
right? No.
An hour.
An hour. Okay.
Is it? Or no, it was more like 2 hours.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So interesting. That there's some physics there. So we swing back from the the easily documented data to the subjective. So what was the difference in taste?
In taste, it came down to I don't know. Basically, at first I thought I maybe tasted little differences between one to the other, and especially as the experiment went on, although there's the conflicting or the confounding influence of alcohol on my palate and brain cells. But I didn't think the flavor differed that much at the beginning, and I thought the differences sort of became less over time. But I did. My initial notes were basically that I scored just on flavor intensity overall, and I did seem to give a nod to the goblet at first, the Orval goblet, and sort of a little bit less flavor I thought coming from the mug beer, but pretty much everything else I scored the same on my arbitrary scale of flavor intensity.
Huh.
Yeah, under aroma I had some differences, and I definitely was confident in saying, yeah, these are different. In the flavor, I was tasting them, and it was more like, well, is that different? It's sort of like, for me, the flavor, and I used Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, by the way, as the beer, just because it was one that I was familiar with, and yeah, so flavor-wise, I didn't detect strong differences. Aroma-wise, I was much more confident in saying, yeah, there was differences between here. And then, obviously, in the measured variables, there were temperature differences, and there were differences in the depth of the foam.
Yeah, I mean, with Steve and me, we were tasting in kind of smaller volume glasses, so that may have had something to do with it. But the Pilsner glasses, the combination of a large amount of foam on top of the beer and the small diameter of the top of the glass, I think led us to having a dramatic taste difference between those glasses and the other glasses. So yeah, I was surprised, and I take it that you were surprised at the differences between the glasses. What was the most surprising of the test?
For me, it was the aromas. Just because going into it, I thought if there was going to be a difference in aroma, I sort of thought that the factor would be the diameter of the glass or the beer is at the top. I sort of thought the goblet, when you put the goblet up to your nose, there's a big circle of beer looking at you, and then I thought you'd be like blown away by the aroma. And the Pilsner glass, and other things are smaller, and I thought it might vary that way. And in fact, when I smelled the goblet initially, it had the least amount of aroma, and I interpret that because it was right to the top, whereas the others had a little. Were sunk down in the glass a little bit, creating a bit of a chamber to withhold some of those aromas. So I would say the initial aroma was the most shocking to me.
And I think it would be interesting to go one step further and kind of play with different beer styles in these different glasses to see, if the Orval and Duvel and everybody who designs their own glass for their own beer, if they really do have something, where if you put one brand of beer in another brand's glass, does it really make a difference, or is that single beer suited for that single shape and volume and such as that? So, like for instance, with us, we were wondering if pouring a Pilsner in the Pilsner glass that we were least impressed with whether the Pilsner glass would show off the aspects of the characteristics of the Pilsner beer better than the other glasses. So, that's a source for future research. An excuse to drink more beer, in other words.
Yep.
So I said in the beginning that the detail of the data that these guys sent in was amazing, as usual. I think we're always blown away by the amount of work that people put into the data that they send in, and we appreciate that a lot. And so what I'm going to do is kind of hit the high points because there's so much, and just hopefully we can get kind of an overall view of the trend of what other people were finding out as well. And I think I'm going to go in the order that they were received. Jonathan from Smith Falls, Ontario, Canada, did an IPA that he wasn't very impressed with, an Imperial Nut Brown Ale, and a Sugar Shack Ale, which is a maple Scotch ale. His conclusion basically is that glass styles for me did affect my drinking experience in aroma and viewing experience. However, glassware did not, as I suspected, change flavor profile at all, as I'm sure most other beer geeks would already know. The only drinking change was in the release of carbonation, which the Inns and Gun Pokal and the Wheat beer glass did very well for head formation. But if you don't want a rapid flattening of your beer, then it would be best avoided in these glasses. So maybe he's saying the faster release of the carbonation, the more head you get, but the flatter beer that you get sooner.
That was actually my impression as well. The Duvel glass, followed by the Sam Adams glass. The Duvel glass was the first one to start tasting flat, and the Sam Adams was the second. And those were both etched on the bottom.
He says, more important, I think it shows that just because a beer may come with a specifically manufactured glass doesn't mean that is what you should always serve it in. Trying a few different glass styles has shown me that a beer can have subtle variations that could change the overall appreciation of the beverage. So, play with your beer. Very nice. Then there is Scott Coué, who is our coffee expert on the show. He's in Detroit, Michigan now. He did 5 glasses, an old-fashioned glass, a vintage cocktail glass, Sam Adams glass, Pilsner glass, and he calls it a Dixie plastic picnic glass, but I think he did the solo cup too. And he did an amber ale and a lighter high-gravity ale. He basically said, let's see. Scott says, neither of these beers are great. Actually, I wouldn't buy the amber ale again, and the Imperial is a very apple cidery brew that is interesting, but... So I don't love either, but I was surprised at how the glassware could change and balance beers that are not particularly balanced. The Sam Adams glass seems to bring out the malt, and the Pils glass seems to bring out the hops. Both have a fair amount of head, and that makes the beer not fizz so much in the mouth. The big surprise was how well the Dixie plastic picnic glass held up. So,
wow.
Yeah. He said that the beer glasses definitely helped the beers I was drinking. The Dixie cup is almost an ale glass, so that may be why it fared well. The glasses that didn't create head had so much residual carbonation that they really fizzed up in the mouth, and the CO2 bubbles on the tongue really masked a lot of flavor. So, if maybe there again, one of the flavor components is carbonation, and that could change the flavor as well. So the dynamics of the glass could actually affect the flavor that way too. He said both beer glasses had a fair amount of head, and that helped them flatten them a bit so you could really taste them. But also a lot of taste is really smell, so glasses where you don't get a lot of smell probably will have less taste also. But since they also had explosive fizz in the mouth and the release of all the CO2, which has a sour taste, just masked the beerness, and one ended up with watery fizz. So the 3 beer glass styles, even if one was plastic, were clear winners. So thanks, Scott. Tom Wallace from Charlottesville, Virginia, tasted a Belgian triple, a Chimay. Is it 5 cents? 5 cents? The I don't do Belgian or French. He took a lot of data. He even counted bubbles. He said the Chimay chalice had a bubble count of 350, and the Pilsner glass had a bubble count of 225. So interesting. So there was a difference in the dynamics there of the bubbles coming up from the glass. He says the Pilsner glass preserved the fine bubbled beer head throughout the entire drinking session, while the coarser chalice head dissipated within a few minutes. Our general impressions were the chalice glass presented the best aroma, which was a light citrus character overlaid by a rich yeasty character. He says the other notable difference was mouthfeel, which grew more distinct as the beer warmed. The Pilsner glass developed a smooth, rich mouthfeel that became almost silky at the end, while the chalice glass presented a coarser, more abrupt mouthfeel. He says it was surprising how different glasses impacted the beer, with everything except flavor differing between the two. In the end, my wife and I preferred the Pilsner glass presentation over the chalice that was designed to serve the beer. So there you go. So again, the flavor being the least different in those. Zott O'Connor from Seattle. Andy Sparks actually went up to Seattle for some training, and I connected them. I said, well, Zott's up there. You should, see him. So they got together and apparently had a fine time. And they had an IPA, homebrew, and a double IPA, the double barrel from Firestone Walker. Courtesy Andy Sparks, Zott says. They had a pint conical and a nonic glass. That's a bulging pint glass. The head was similar. The aroma, Zott says the difference between the two was huge. He says the nonic had 20 to 50 times the aroma. This was verified by 4 different people. With aroma difference, everyone tasting the beers thought there was a big difference in the taste. I did not tell them it was the same beer. He says the bulge changed the aroma of the beer dramatically for a hoppy beer and affected the perceived taste of the beer. I now cringe when I drink a hoppy beer and anything else, especially the bottle. He says also Andy has damn fine taste in beer, which we knew and has been scientifically proven. Brian Davis from Lyle, Minnesota, did a double IPA and a Weizenbock, or is it, how do you pronounce that?
I think it's Weizenbock, but
Weizenbock.
Don't go by mine, my pronunciation.
He did a snifter, a sampler from New Glarus, a mini Pilsner, and a nonic. He says his pint glass collection is going the way of my golf ball collection. Reminders of where I've been, but not very useful. There are certainly some styles that would be best in a shaker type glass, ones that you don't really care about the aroma or don't have one. BMC, he says. That's Budweiser, Miller, Coors. But for the beers I like, the snifter or the English pint nonic are the way to go. I just poured the rest of my Weizenbock sample into the snifter. 2 bombers and time for bed. He says, say goodnight, James and Chris. He says, initially there wasn't much difference in the aroma, but with time the snifter and the nonic retained much more aroma. So he says, since smell is such a major component in taste, the snifter wins here also, just a more complete experience. So there again, more difference. Danny Conan from Gainesville, Florida, did a BJ's straight-sided standard mixer glass, a Samuel Adams perfect pint glass, and a New Belgium stemmed globe glass, which looks like a cross between a snifter and a wine glass. Tasted a Hefeweizen, a bottle-conditioned very old Northern English brown, and a brown porter. He says, I had anticipated the aroma differences between the glasses, but I was very surprised about the flavor differences, which were quite noticeable. Since most flavors we perceive are strongly affected by the simultaneous stimulation of the taste buds on the tongue and the olfactory receptors in the nose, I did the Hefeweizen test again with my nose pinched shut. Lo and behold, all 3 samples suddenly tasted exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that the Sam Adams and New Belgium glasses seem to retain carbonation better than the mixer glass. It seems as if the Sam Adams and New Belgium glasses enhance both aroma and flavor complexity, which can be a good thing, but it can also be overwhelming, depending, I guess, on the style of beer. The lesson here is that there is no clear winner. Different styles of beer shine in different types of glassware. I recommend investing in a half dozen or so different glass types and playing with them until you find the favorite for each style. That may or may not be the glassware with which the style is traditionally associated. So that's not the first time we've heard that. Thanks for this experiment. It really opened my eyes, and I hope that my data are useful and not too tainted by progressive intoxication. So I think Danny has a point. That maybe maybe you have a collection of different glasses and you play with them and see which is best with which beer. Greg Gramlich from Fort Collins, Colorado, did a homebrewed IPA in a standard pint glass, a goblet, and a Sam Adams glass. He says, Jim Cook isn't crazy when it comes to beer glasses. His glass seems, to me anyway, to bring out the hop flavor and aroma better than the other 2 glasses, although I did like the way the goblet kept the beer colder for longer. My final conclusion, drinking 3 pints of IPA from 3 different glasses while trying to notice subtle differences in taste and aroma can give you a nice buzz really quick. So he said the Sam Adams glass had a slightly stronger aroma, while the pint glass had the weakest aroma there. So very interesting as well. Richard and Debbie Scipione from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, who recently celebrated their 13th anniversary, I believe. They did an American Pale Ale and a Pilsner and a pint glass. The pint glass had better head volume and retention. The pint glass had a much stronger hop citrus aroma than the Pilsner. Flavor differences were harder to detect. The pint may have a slightly more hoppy flavor due to the stronger aroma, but they were pretty close. They say, it seems that the wider mouth of the pint glass may contribute to a fuller aroma. Also, the pint being wider overall and without the more dramatic taper of the Pilsner may have more surface area in contact with the beer. Could this contribute to the larger, longer-lasting head and increased aroma? So they actually had their pint glass actually had better head volume and retention than the Pilsner, which is backwards from what we found.
Yeah, and backwards from what you would expect, too.
Yeah. Christopher Owen from Louisville, Kentucky, had a homebrew IPA in a 16-ounce regular pint glass, a Duvel glass, and a 12-ounce brandy snifter. He said he brought up some points, like, for instance, the tulip glass and the pint glass distributed the beer across my whole tongue as the rims were wide. The brandy snifter channeled the beer to the tip of the tongue and across the middle of the tongue, missing the sides altogether. So, there's some dynamics there as well that we haven't talked about. He says, half the fun of being a beer geek is matching my beers to the appropriate glass and collecting cool glassware. However, I don't observe any significant difference between the glass styles in terms of taste and aroma, which is what beer is about. I may give a slight edge to the snifter during judging events, but I imagine the cleanliness of the glassware makes a much bigger difference than the shape of the glass. So he didn't, between the pint glass, the dual glass, and the brandy snifter, didn't see as significant differences. So very interesting. It seems like the trend in all those is that the design of the glass has a larger impact on the formation and retention of the head and the aroma than the flavor, although most people thought that all were affected by the design of the glass. So very interesting. And so, going into this, Chris, you said you were a skeptic, but, coming out the other side?
Yeah, going into it, I thought that, as a beer person, I have a lot of different beer glasses, and I like sort of serving beer in, its appropriate glass or whatever, but I didn't really hold out much hope that there would be much difference in how the beer was perceived. I didn't believe, because I'd seen that, etched glasses raised more foam, but I was shocked when I saw that the aroma was so much different for me. And for me, it didn't really play into the flavor, although, that certainly aroma is very connected with flavor, and many people might have perceived it that way. I hadn't really thought much about it, but the way that the etched glasses decarbonated the beer so rapidly were something that I hadn't really considered. Since I was drinking 8 beers simultaneously, I was over a 2-hour period, and they warmed up quite a bit. In reality, if you're drinking one beer from one glass, like a common bridge troll, you're probably not going to have, you're going to be done with the beer before too much of that effect starts showing up. But if you're drinking 8 beers simultaneously. Yeah, there's one set of glassware recommendations I would have, and if you're drinking one beer, different. I don't know. I was impressed with the Duvel glass because it had a stem and where the beer was sitting. When you pour 12 ounces into the 16-ounce glass, the beer sat in a relatively thin-walled, almost globe, and it retained its temperature well. The other one I was sort of shocked with was the performance of the lowly plastic cup.
So when we come to your house for a beer, don't be offended if you drag out the red plastic Solo cups.
Yeah, that might not happen. Nor will you see like a plastic keg cup on the cover of BYO anytime soon. But yeah, I will consider it for especially for outdoor events. Sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I think informative. And I hope that people will take the results and apply it to their lives and make their lives better in some way.
Yeah, I think the take-home message is that, as a couple people have said, the glasses do make a difference. And if you have a favorite beer style, it might behoove you to try it in a few different kinds of glasses, because as a couple people have mentioned, the traditional glass, might not be the best presentation, especially given that people's, your perceptions vary. So, the best glass for you might, for a wheat beer might not be a wheat beer glass.
Well, there you go. Awesome. I appreciate it again, Chris. This has been fun. I look forward to next time.
Yep. Talk to you next time.
Well, thanks again to everybody participating in the experiment. And as usual, thanks to Chris. We'll talk to him again in July when we go over our yeast hydration results, too. Don't forget to participate in that while we're away. I won't be here to remind you. You can get a free issue of Brew Your Own by clicking on the banner ad on our Basic Brewing site. And if you decide to subscribe after reading it, you'll be helping us to support the show. We appreciate it greatly. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can find our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits on our site, along with our shirts and our logbooks, too. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. And remember, the revenue from that link this week will go toward the American Red Cross and their efforts to support those damaged by the tornado. I know they would appreciate the support as well. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Abiotic Disorders of Landscape Plants and Halex Classic Series Bocce Set, 90mm composite molded balls. Insert your own molded balls reference here. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.